Good afternoon once again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the LinkedIn Live session. As the placement season is on, we have been visiting multiple colleges, myself, other founders and co-founders, several senior mentors, and we have been getting a lot of questions from students about how do we really prepare for this ongoing placement season. And in particular, a lot of college students who we meet at various forums have been asking for help in terms of preparing, in terms of really facing the challenging placement scenarios. So we thought that, why not share all the data that we have captured, all our learnings with a wider community of students, training and placement officers, deans and directors, and our friends from corporate world to kind of give a sense of what do we see from YUGMA lens when we visit 30, 40 colleges across multiple cities in India, and how do we see the whole placement season panning, and what do we see some of the key learnings which our students can pick up. So this whole session is actually targeted to help our students who are graduating in 2026, going through the placement just now as part of the process. And we want to share some of the insights that we've captured. If we really look at our journey from a VMentor YUGMA perspective, I think we've always been tracking the placement for many years now, and we've been working for last 14, 15 years. And we have seen that while there will be inflation-based CTC changes, principally, how is the whole scheme of placement process changing? How is the thought process around companies changing, the way they look at talent, the way they look at Gen Z talent, and so on and so forth. Placement conversion has been a very important factor. While a lot of colleges get a lot of companies, they find that either the companies are hiring only one resource and or not hiring at all. Some of the companies are organizing pooled campus. Somehow the feeling within the corporates, which I get a sense while talking to hiring managers and HR professionals, is that they now sense that across tier 2 and tier 3, the talent is very much spread. The top 20-25% student of these colleges are really good, and therefore they want to take advantage of that pooled campus approach where they're able to invite students from multiple colleges into one particular college and then be able to tap into the wider resource pool. So some of those trends we want to talk about. Obviously, we at YUGMA are very focused around helping students enhance their employability. Our mission, touching the lives of 500,000 learners in the next few years, is actually focused towards making sure that our students really get aligned to what's happening in the industry, are aware about the key developments happening, and therefore they are able to prepare themselves well. Let me talk about a few input from the overall industry perspective. So what are the placement trends that we see? So as we hear all the noise around the global challenges that businesses are facing, whether it is the tariff barriers, whether it is one country fighting against the other country, even the world trade is now far more global than it was 5-10 years back. We find that while our economy, the Indian economy, may be the fastest growing large economy in the world, we still are very much impacted by the way global trade is moving. Whether it is a dumping from China, on some of the commodity products, or whether it is the high tariff barrier that we are facing with US. We continue to face challenges in European Union, while some agreements have been reached with UK. The whole environment is very much volatile. And imagine if you were running a corporate, would you be really gung-ho about making investments? And therefore, we have seen that it's a very, measured approach that corporates are taking in terms of the way they would make investments in growth. Some of them are making it because they see that the next few years demand is really going to be high, and therefore that capacity addition is being done. Now, because of this changing environment, companies are turning cautious, and that is putting an impact on the placement. Now, that may not be because of what's happening in the institute or how students are prepared, but it's important that we understand how the world around us changes. And that's where when we talk to students about preparing for placement, we tell them that, look, you need to be understanding how economy is performing, how the related sectors are getting impacted because of the economical changes, policy changes, government policies, and so on and so forth. And therefore, what impact it has, and therefore the way the number of jobs are going to be offered, the nature of jobs that are going to be offered are going to change. Some of the highlight that I want to talk about, there are banks, large banks in the private sector who have not hired enough in the last few years. If you go to some of the campuses, they were large, they were hiring in large numbers. And those banks have either been absent or they've only been hiring very select level roles. So this drop of some of the leading banks hiring by 30, 40, 50% has really impacted our management college campuses, where our finance student and some of the marketing and sales students who are targeting these banks in the BFSI sector are being impacted. IT, we all know, is impacted big time because of this whole automation journey that companies have been on. This whole AI, machine learning, data analytics, coupled with all the new tools, are really impacting the bottom level jobs. And some of the IT companies, especially the large and mid-sized companies, have been hiring a lot of MBA students from the campuses for management trainee roles, and we've seen a slowdown happening in that space, roughly about 10 odd percent. Then we also see that there's a shift now happening with companies trying to focus on reskilling of their employees. Recognizing that automation will anyway throw up a lot of productivity improvements. Therefore, there will be redundancy. The good news is that existing employees are being retrained by companies and being retained, but that has impact on the campuses. If let's say 8 to 10% people are going to be redundant, and those roles, part of those roles were going to be filled by junior employees hired from the campus, that's not happening. That's again impacting about 10-12%. We see FMCG companies, fresher hiring dropping. Of course, there's attrition pressure on banks and FMCG companies, but we also see that somewhere the urban demand has not been as strong as it was expected to be, and as it is reflected in the turnovers of large FMCG companies, and that's impacting. Of course, some automation is also happening, some upskilling is happening. Large consulting giants have also reduced their overall hiring. In fact, they have taken the route of the new way of hiring, which is hire interns for a year aligned with the Government of India program. And then, after 1 year on successful completion of internship, they are being absorbed. So that also is having some impact. Top manufacturing companies have gone into a lot of automation, focusing on digital manufacturing, enhancing their supply chain, reducing supply chain cost. That's also leading to some numbers being reduced. And the new boy, the real estate, last few years, they've been really hiring. And I've seen tier 2 colleges, overall proportion of real estate roles going all the way from 2% to 10% to 12%. That's also slowly coming down. So if you look at this whole scenario, so while we are talking on one side that companies are getting a bit cautious on their growth journey, their investment journey, and because of the changing market condition, there's somewhere between 10 to 12 to 15% reduction. So we have to understand. I think our students have to understand that there's a general market trend where roles have actually come down. Number of roles have come down. Companies have become very cautious in hiring. So what are the real placement challenges that we see from YUGMA's perspective? When we talk to multiple experts, we find that one of the things that companies are highlighting, companies who are hiring from the market, is the employable skill gap. What I call as transferable skills? Would you be able to demonstrate that whatever skills you have developed in the college, university, as part of your practical projects, as part of summer internship, will you be able to go and deliver using those skills? Especially, I think you kind of take up role in any specialization. Let's say you work for a finance company, you work for a bank, you work for FMCG retail company. There are three elements which are definitely going to happen. One, lot of data. So how would you do data analysis, data analytics, visualization, use of tools for data analysis, right? So learning about data is very critical. And I think companies are telling us that not many students have actually focused on building the skill. Of course, digital transformation is almost now, I would say, 15 years old, kind of a terminology. And still some of the companies are in their digital transformation journey. Not enough is being kind of taught to students around the modern way of digital transformation. How companies are really using digital to empower their customers, make the life of the customers easy, simple. The whole connect with the customers have gone so up, and so high, and therefore empowering the customers to kind of work on a self-service mode. Now, this digital transformation does impact on some of the roles, but important is those people who are getting into corporate needs to be knowing the nuances of digital transformations. I think there's a visible gap being seen in these three buckets, and of course, AI. AI tools are being used. We hear. Funnily enough, I went to a college in Chennai, and the director told me that some students were raising questions saying, why do we need faculty given AI can answer all our questions? All the theoretical questions can be answered by the tools like ChatGPT and Gemini and others. Why do we need really faculties to kind of tell us the knowledge piece? And I think that's a reality right now. But the real input from corporate is that these skills are still not acquired well by the students. Okay, and I talked about decline in campus recruitment. Given that the attrition of new hires, let's say people who are less than 1 year old, what we normally used to call in the corporate space as short-term leavers, that's been increasing. In some sectors gone high, 40, 50, 60%. There has been a bit of a focus on lateral hiring. Companies are saying, instead of hiring with no experience, why not hire people with 1 to 2 years experience? Now, if you think about it, this approach actually means that some employees of some companies will have to leave to join in some other company, right? And maybe this is one of the other factor contributing towards the attrition. But the fact that companies are now preferring lateral hiring, they are looking, we are hiring for one of the top companies, and we find that 50 to 55% roles of that company is actually lateral hiring with some experience of, let's say, 2 to 3 years experience, right? And that is why one of the suggestions we give to students, when we do mentoring is, when you are a college, first try to land into a job. And when you land into a job of a choice, and you like the role, you like the company, spend 18, 24 months at least and gain some practical skills, because then, you start getting into that lateral hiring journey. So that's another important factor that we kind of see. Employers continue to find that the behavioral skill gap is still continuing to exist in students, especially highlighting about Gen Z. They feel that, it's still not, the kind of soft skill that they expect of students to kind of have. They would have developed those soft skills of, let's say, managing themselves or managing small teams. That's not something that they see happening as well. And therefore, you find that companies are kind of rejecting candidates in final interview stage, given lack of behavioral skills. And we also seen this whole trend around gig workers, freelancing talent, where some companies, at least a small percentage of companies, in a small percentage, are actually looking at gig workers and freelance talent. That's also impacting in some form and shape. So if I can summarize the environment, the way we see today, on one side, global economy impact because of this whole turbulence that's happening, companies getting cautious, focusing on less hiring, change in hiring approach, and then there is a general reduction in overall hiring that happens. Now, obviously, all of this means that there's significant impact in the campuses, because we know some of the colleges right now where a lot of companies have come in the campus, but placement has not happened. Enough placement have not happened. I know some colleges where some 50 companies have come and they still not touched 3-digit, in terms of offers. So that's quite a challenge, and that's where we mentor YUGMA comes in. I'll just briefly talk about who we are and what we do. We kind of solve two problems at scale. As we mentor, we work with large number of corporates, some 50 to 60 corporates we work, large ones, mid-sized ones, where we solve strategic problems at scale, working with CEOs and CXOs. Our focus is on the whole value chain, from strategy development to strategy deployment, and all the functional areas of finance, marketing, sales, supply chain, digital, HR, and so on and so forth. But our focus has been on solving the people challenges, the people problem, both in terms of capacity and capability. So that's the area that we kind of focus on from VMentor perspective. And we work with large corporations, training, mentoring, coaching of their leaders, building competency models, aligning organizations to those models, and helping them move forward on their vision and their goals. So that's the broad work that we do in the VMentor space. While on the YUGMA side, as you know, we are focusing on mentoring our students, both on the engineering side and management side, and making sure that they are better employable, companies like them, and they're able to hire them. And we really focus them to become job ready, placement ready, and career ready. So that's the whole focus that we bring from a YUGMA perspective. A YUGMA employability foundation that we have, the Section 8 company that we have, focuses on a similar kind of approach as we do in YUGMA, but focusing more on economically not so strong students, people who come from background where they need some support. And we have been kind of looking to help those colleges where they cannot afford mentoring cost, and therefore we will be able to kind of help them mentor their students at no cost, and also help them in getting some placement and things like that. All this that we have been doing over the last several years of our existence, 6 years to be precise, we've been partnering with large corporations, the NASSCOM, the Retailer Association, and many more, to make sure that we're able to build an ecosystem and offer our services. And therefore, you would see that we work with some of the best tier 2 and tier 3 colleges in the country, and we kind of, the focus is more on tier 2, tier 3, where they need help. But I think we have been working regularly with these 30, 40 colleges to kind of help them progress on the placement journey and the employability journey. Now, if I really wear the lens of the recruiters, I talked about the challenges and some of the practical challenges that we see. If I specifically look at what the CHROs are telling us, what head of HRs are telling us, what the hiring managers are telling who come to the campus for hiring, these are some of the input that we have got last year and this year. I think the first thing that companies are expecting, again, students, this is focused on you. The first thing that they're expecting is, please build your basics in functional skills. During interviews, basics in specialization are found to be missing. What do I mean by that? When companies ask this question to students, can you tell me how banks make money? Can you tell me what's the business of banking? How does it operate? Can you explain me the operating model of this FMCG company? Students are not able to kind of, explain this whole process. Similarly, some of the technical nuances, talking about some of the balance sheet and P&L for finance student, talking about ratios, talking about how do you build a digital marketing strategy, for a company, looking at their marketing strategy. How would you improve operations in a company to reduce costs by 10% or 20%, So looking at the practical way and combining that with the functional skills, are you able to demonstrate some of the basic knowledge and awareness? That's something that is regularly being found as gaps. And, and we've been advising students while we do mentoring program to say, focus on the basics of functional skills. The other thing that companies are highlighting, which is which has been an input on a very regular basis is the lack of practical skills. While colleges have their own curriculum, sometimes driven by an university, sometimes they're driven by their own structure, we still find that curriculums are still very theoretical. Old, let's say case studies may not be very recent ones. When we ask students about some of the recent case studies, how does HDFC Bank and HDFC Limited merger impact the industry and impact the organization? How does it impact the placement opportunities? Students are not able to relate to some of the recent happenings that happening. How does the whole e-commerce market is changing? This whole duopoly of Amazon and Flipkart, and how this whole quick commerce market changing. Students are not able to kind of relate to in the real practical way, because those case studies are not being discussed in the class, or being discussed in a very limited way. So the practical skill of doing a field project, going and talking to customers, going and talking to senior managers in companies, doing live projects, that is something that's a gap. As a gap, it's coming out, and the applicability of the management concept, the application of management concept is something that is found as a gap. And related to that is, obviously, we find that in India, in tier 2 and tier 3 especially, 75, 80, 85, 90% of students are without experience. They do graduation, they do engineering or any other graduation, and they come and join MBA institutions or PGDM programs, right? So they lack practical experience. Now, obviously, it has got multiple impact. When they sit in the class, I am sure that they have their own challenge of relating to what's being discussed, and they take some time to understand. But more importantly, I think the 2 or 3 months that our students get in internship, we find that internships are turning out to be more of theoretical aspect, where all the focus is on doing so-called internship project and writing a report, rather than getting some real practical industry exposure. An industry exposure would actually mean not only working on that specific project, but getting a sense of the corporate environment, getting a sense of the corporate culture, getting a sense of how companies operate. See, imagine when we talk to students, we tell them that you are exposed to typically two control environments. One at home, where you grew, let's say you spent till class 12 or graduation in many cases, then you come to a graduate institution or a PG institution, you get a very different ecosystem. So imagine our young talent, they are exposed to two different ecosystems, one at home, where they get all the support model is very strong. Commitment is very strong. When they come to college, support model is there. Maybe the monitoring may not be there as much. So when they move to the third ecosystem, which is the corporate ecosystem, neither the support may be there, nor that mentoring or monitoring may be very different. Managers typically, when we ask some of the students about their summer internship experience, they tell us that, look, sir, the manager only expects me to kind of talk about the work that I've been allocated. And it's very different to what we see in the college. So I think that practical exposure of learning about industry, learning about corporates, learning about the culture of the organizations, building that connect and network, I think that's not happening well. And that's impacting, and that's coming out during placement processes. And of course, students lack practical exposure to data analysis, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. The other important element that we've got a lot of feedback, and in fact, we did survey across 500 students, TPOs, deans and directors, and faculty and corporation, employees, that certifications are just becoming a tag on the CV. Just a bullet on the CV saying I have done ABCD certification. Any detailed question, any in-depth question being asked on certifications are not being answered by students, right? So certifications are not adding value, and therefore the impact of all of this is that there is a skill gap that companies are finding, the practical exposure lacking and the skill gap coming up. So now I've talked about a lot about the challenges. Now let's talk about what to do now. You are a student, you are in the third semester, getting ready or already in the process of placement. How will you get ready? What would you do now, with all these challenges that you're facing? Let me share some practical experience and practical tips from our perspective. I'm kind of sharing the four stage, what we call as the four critical gates in the whole placement journey. And of course, this is not new to all of you, but let me highlight a few things that we see happening. Quite a lot of companies, given the volume of applications, are now relying on online aptitude tests. Okay, so we run quite a few of those tests. We have our own test called YUGMA Employability Score. A lot of companies use our YES and YEQ scores for their hiring purposes. And we find that there are some very basic questions in the aptitude test, and students still are not able to get 50% or 60%, which normally is the cutoff in those tests. So aptitude test is becoming a gate of elimination. Students are appearing, and therefore they are not able to clear. The second aspect is the whole process. Once you apply, your quality of CV matters. Are you able to get shortlisted through the ATS process? Or are you able to get shortlisted when somebody even is manually screening it? So, students need help actually to make sure that their CVs are well set up, well structured, they are ATS aligned, and some of those keywords are there which allows them to get shortlisted. So we see that a lot of elimination is happening from the ATS software. The third stage, the group discussion and the case study level, where students are actually getting eliminated. They go to group discussion sessions and they feel that they've done very well, only to find that they are being rejected. And I'll talk about a bit more in detail on group discussion in the later slide. But I think what students fail to understand is that group discussions are not simply a test of your knowledge on the topic or test of your communication skill. There are a lot of other skills being tested. For example, are you a good listener? Are you participating in the discussion? Are you all ears in the discussion? Or are you showing a sine curve approach where you speak when your opportunity comes and then you go quiet? You start fiddling your pen or start getting busy somewhere else. So I think group discussion is becoming a point where a lot of students are getting rejected. And then, of course, the final interview, which could be a combination of personal interview and functional interview. And I think this is where the depth of knowledge, the practical knowledge about sector, knowledge about the company, why should we hire you, those kind of questions get answered. And therefore, this is the final gate through which the student have to go through before they get the offer letter. So I think students, you have to really focus on these gates and make sure that you are able to kind of clear all of these gates. I'm going to talk about a bit more details on this. Now, given all of this scenario, if I talk about from a YUGMA perspective and our last 15 years worth of work, we find that there is a model that works today, and this is the model that we have developed in YUGMA. If you start from the top part of the model, what we call as getting placed. If you ask any student in a management college, why have you come here? What's your goal? What's your focus? I think you get a unanimous answer, sir, we want to get placed. Many of those engineering students who have actually done engineering and could not get placed, they join MBA program with a view that post MBA they will get placed and placed better, right? So getting placed is an important requirement. But we also know that there are a lot of students who say, I not only want to get placed, I want to get placed in the role of my choice. I want to work in specific roles. I want to become a product manager. I want to become a relationship manager. I want to become a technical analyst, right? So there are specific roles which students really look for. And then there are students who want to go the next level, which is, can I also focus on the specific company that I want to go to, the specific sector that I can go to? Can I join fintechs? Can I go into new age companies which are focusing more on AI, ML, and some of the new technologies? Can I work on cybersecurity? Can I work on risk management? So a lot of new areas are getting developed, and therefore there's a focus on not only role of the choice, but also sector of the choice, right? And at the end, students are of course focused on the commercial aspect. How do I target the top end roles, the roles with higher CTCs? For tier two, a 15 lakh CTC could be a really top of the line. While for some of the new, some of the newer colleges, newer and high end colleges, 20, 25 lakh could be the high end. So how do I target those kind of desired CTC? And keeping this in mind, our programs at YUGMA have actually been designed, and I'll talk about it at the end, just giving you some sense of it. But what we understand is, if you want to go through this journey, you need to focus on building your behavioral skills, building some of your skills which companies are looking at, and the basic skills companies are looking at. Do you understand the roles that you are applying for? Do you have the knowledge, the basic knowledge of that domain? Do you understand sector and industry and how the company is moving? Do you really understand the business model of the company, right? So some of the basic behavioral skills, and functional skills companies are looking for. They're also looking for, basic communication skills, presentation skills, data analytics skills. So I think these skills kind of form the initial requirement of some of the roles. But then there are companies which hire management graduates. They also expect you to have some high-end, what they call as management skills. Can you come and solve problems? Can you help me change our business model? Can you, work in the digital transformation project? Can you manage a small team? So, these are some of the vertical skills that we find that companies are looking for. So the objective is to kind of give a view to student of where are you targeting. There are multiple levels at which you can target, but please understand every level have their own skill requirement, and you should be able to understand that, and you should be able to prepare accordingly. Just talking about the aptitude, it's such a funny thing that most of the MBA students actually clear aptitude tests. They do well in their MBA entrance exam before they join MBA colleges, right? And the same aptitude becomes a barrier when they're going for placement. Of course, when I ask this question to students, they all smile and say, "Sir, we've not practiced enough." And while during the MBA program, we practiced so much, we knew the insights. Here, we don't get time to practice, right? So I think what we tell students is that make sure that, especially, before you start your, let's say, summer internship project journey, at least make sure that you brush up some of the key elements of aptitude. And today, most of these things are available online for you. We ourselves have our online test available. We help colleges and the students to actually help practice. There are hundreds of tests which are available online on our platform, where a student can come and appear in those tests. We tell them to focus on quant, verbal ability, logical reasoning, and some of the business skills. These are the combination that works when the aptitude test happens. And if the stakes are high, because of course, if you don't do well, and your competition, your other students are doing well, then the chances are that you will get rejected, or you will not get shortlisted, right? So that's a challenge that students are facing, mostly in the tier 2, tier 3 colleges, especially the lower part of tier 2 colleges, where they are applying to some of the companies. So I think the only solution is that you need to go back, pick up your notes that you used during your MBA preparation, go and brush up some of the concepts. But the most important thing is practice, practice, practice. Go online, look at a platform. You can come to us, we can offer you a platform, and you can just practice 8 or 10 tests. It will give you the fluency. And believe me, just by doing mock test and looking at some of the mistakes and going through those mistakes and correcting them, working on them, has helped student brush up and do well. So, we do offer aptitude test program of 40 hours in many colleges, which students benefit from, both as a classroom session and then later as an online practice session. So aptitude, make sure that you don't get eliminated at this stage. If you move on, the other three phases, and we've just used a percentage here to give you a sense that at a CV stage you get rejected, at group discussion, case study stage, and then of course the last 15-25% student who land up in the PI stage, they also need to go through that process, and based on their performance, they kind of get selected or get rejected. So all of these stages matter. I think the CV is the next important one to focus on. How do I build the right quality of CV? How do I really build on my CV so that it captures my personality, my experience, my past achievements, and so on and so forth. We have found that CVs are still not being written properly. The basics within CVs are not correct. The focus is not there. Templates are not being used, and that's causing a lot of elimination. And we found that, especially if you look at CV, I look at CV in terms of three parts. And just to share with you, students, you can go back and look at your CV. The first part of the CV, the top part, is typically your academics. Okay. The second part, the central part of a CV, is your experience, where you write down your past experience, your summer internship project, your life project. So all the practical experience is right at the center. And then the bottom part of the CV is about your certification, skills, extracurricular activities, and so on and so forth. Right. So that's the broad, kind of coverage of the CV. And if you look at the CV as a document, I ask this question: where does your eye go? And by human being, the way we are trained, we typically focus on the center of the CV, right, where your experience is lying, and that's where experience matters. In your summer internship matters, and the way you articulate your summer internship, both on your CV and while talking during interview, really matters, right? And that's where you need to focus on. And of course, we've also been getting a lot of input, as I talked earlier, about certifications. Then candidates highlight that they've acquired the skill through the certification. During interview stage, especially, companies are not finding that students have really gained certification. There's a high level knowledge acquired. The practical aspect is missing because most of the certifications are just theoretical. You watch a video, give an assessment, clear the certification, right? And you write that down on your CV. That doesn't give you the practical experience. The certifications are not being delivered by let's say trained mentors in a classroom where you are able to impact on the learning of the student. There's no peer learning happening in most cases, because in most cases, students actually do learning on their own. Even if they get questions, they're not able to ask questions because there's no mentor available. There are passive ways to ask questions. You ask question, and then maybe the response you get after a few hours or 24 hours, right? And therefore, you're not able to take advantage, of that particular program, and you simply complete the program. The learning is very, very limited. So what would you do this? So if I can just highlight some do's and don'ts while you are preparing on the CV. Of course, we have been reviewing hundreds of CVs in the last few months, and while we find some basic problem, for example, we still see spelling mistakes, formatting errors. I actually want to highlight a key element here. That what is really required on your CV. We see that across multiple students, copy paste of similar content, even if ChatGPT or other AI tools have been used. The words are just copied from there, no customization has happened, long paragraphs are there. Is that really depicting you as a candidate, as a person, who is really bringing a set of skills for companies, and he's actually there to, work for a particular corporate. So what should you be doing? Focus on your CV. Make sure that if you work with your institute, most of the institutes actually have a very well-defined format. We from YUGMA perspective, whenever we interview students, or let's say do mock CV review, or we do mock PI, we give feedback even to institutes in terms of their templates. But make sure that your CV is aligned to the job description, to the job that you're applying for. It kind of captures. Let's say if you are a finance student and focused on building your career in a bank or a corporate finance, your CV should reflect that, right? If I read your CV, I should be able to see the alignment of what corporate finance role will require or what a banking role will require. So how will you customize your base CV? So develop one base CV, keep it as a standard CV available, and then customize some elements depending on what companies are looking for. Of course, highlighting those aspects, yeah, that you bring on the table. It's not about creating something new, but making sure that whatever is your experience, you try and align that from that company's job description perspective, and highlight some of the specific skills that you bring on the table. Um, don't go into too much of detailed writing. When let me highlight this aspect about writing your experience or summer internship details, right? We use a model called CAL model, CAL, CAL model, what we call as contribution, achievement, and learning model. As a student, if you look at the CAL model, contribution, achievement, and learning model, think about wherever you are doing work, wherever you've gone for summer internship and you've gone for a practical project, think about what did you contribute to that organization. When companies give you summer internship, they're not giving you for charity, they're not giving you just to give you experience, but they actually want you to solve one of their problems. Come there and do something for them, right? Do a market research, do some findings, talking to the customers, or solve some problems. So therefore, think about what contribution you made while you did some summer project or a practical project. So focus on your contribution element to the company. Then look at achievements. What did you achieve during those 2 months or 3 months? Were you given a target? How did you perform as compared to the target? That shows your target orientation, your goal orientation, and companies love it, believe me. When you talk about that, I had X target and I achieved X plus delta, companies like it because they know that, okay, this person would work for a target, this person will be goal focused, which corporates really like it, and, of course, learning. In every stage, are you learning something? Remember, I talked about learning about the culture of the organization when you go for summer internship. It's not only about the functional skill or the practical skill, but also, let's say, networking skill. How many employees did you meet up? Did you meet any of your alumni, for example? Did you go and spend some time with alumni trying to get some deep insights from the company? So make sure that you try and bring those elements here, and you are able to showcase the practical experience, what we call as transferable skills, and you should be able to very clearly write those down. Not a very cluttered CV, but very professional tone, a very clear way of writing, and of course highlighting your strengths. Don't copy from each other. Think about what's your genuine strength. What are you good at? Are you a good coordinator? Are you a good presenter? Are you a good communicator? Are you a problem solver? What are you? And highlight that. Do you bring some leadership skills? Do you bring some analytical skills? Highlight those skills, and talk about it. See, one of the things that we find when we do interviews is that students write their skills, but they are not able to articulate. When you ask them, give me an example where you demonstrated leadership skill, and they're not able to give you an adequate answer, right? So one of the things that I suggest to all students is identify an anecdotal example from your past, during your college days, during your practical project time, or working with a company on summer internship project. What kind of problem did you solve? What kind of actions did you take? Can you come out with some example? And when you narrate that example, then you need not call about your strength, because the interviewer will themselves interpret and understand about the level of competency that you bring on the table, right? So that's the important element from a CV perspective. Okay, moving on to the next part, which is the group discussion. Let me check, Ria, are there any questions at this stage? Ayush, any questions at this stage?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay, so then I will move on. So just very briefly on group discussion, I think we're all very familiar with group discussion, but let me highlight a few pointers where we see student not doing very, very well. Of course, there's normally a whole tendency about trying to start, being the first to speak, and we tell students that, look, while if you're the first person who speaks, you are able to draw some attention, but please make sure that you are well prepared, because remember, the opening batsman in any form of cricket or any form of game, the opening batsman get the opportunity to actually hit the ball first, and you are also the first one to get out, right? So if you do well, you score well. If you don't do well, you get out. So make sure that you make a good start. To make a good start, you need to be prepared well. You should have identified a number of topics. You should have thought about what are the potential topics this company is going to ask. Read about those topics, prepare some notes, get ready to participate in group discussion in terms of topics and content. Now that's really important. Similarly, at the end, people want to end during group discussion. Make sure that you made notes while participating in group discussion. How will you summarize well so that your summary captures the essence of the discussion that happened in the group, right? It's not simply a summary that you are creating on your own. It is about saying, this is what we discussed, which could say, these were the points which were made for the topic, these were the points made against the topic, this is the conclusion being drawn, these are my views that I am presenting, right? So how would you not only summarize, which tells the recruiter that you are so much alive during those whole group discussion session, but also you are able to summarize and give your own views. Now, the other challenge we find is that what I call a sine curve. Students speak, then they feel, oh, my role is done. Then they remain quiet for many minutes. Then suddenly they wake up and start speaking, right? Look at group discussion as a team meeting in a company. Okay, in a team meeting, you don't just speak and then go quiet. It's all about participative discussion. How do you do participative discussion? Most important part is listening skill. Are you listening? Are you understanding what your colleague sitting there in the discussion, or your friend sitting there in the discussion is talking about, and how would you respond when a particular point is being made? So make sure that you are able to focus. So listening skill is important. Make sure that you're also building on new ideas, new thoughts, highlighting some of the new aspect about those points. One of the don't I highlight typically is that take examples which are more from the business perspective. We see a lot of students taking examples of let's say either a movie, or they talk about politics. Some may talk about sports as well, which is okay in some cases. But make sure that your examples are reflecting on the topic and links with the industry and the sector, which again is an opportunity for you to demonstrate the skill from that perspective. Be very clear, concise, participative, and so on and so forth. DD is all about practicing. Practice with your group of friends from your college, and make sure that you're giving peer feedback to each other. Work on feedback being given by your mentor when we do mock interviews. So that's about group discussion. We come to the last stage, which is the personal interview. Typically, personal interview happens at 2 levels. Some companies do it at even 3 levels. There can be a HR round, what we call as the personal interview one. Then there could be a functional round, and then there could be a final interview, right? But some of the key things, what do we see missing there? Tell me about yourself is still a most common question, and still a question which is not answered very well. And therefore, we tell students that how do you develop and talk about your elevator pitch? Make sure that you are able to use this opportunity to really create about yourself, talk about your strength and weakness, your practical experience about your summer internship, focusing on what are the practical exposure that you've got from that perspective. So what are some of the key pointers you will keep in mind, what we call as the gold sheet? As a management student, the first thing we talk about is have some goals. Have some short-term, medium-term target for yourself. The question that comes from an interviewer saying, how do you see yourself 2, 3 years down the line? Do you really understand the organization hierarchy? Before you quote and say, I'll become a manager, I'll become a VP, do you understand what level would you join in a company and how do you grow? Have you spoken to an alumni? Have you spoken to an employee of the company to understand what hierarchy you will typically go through in few years' time? So make sure that you understand that. But having a goal is important. Next comes focusing on the company that you are applying for. What does this company do? What is the business model of the company? What are the vision, mission of the company? What are the growth drivers? How does the company kind of connect with the customers? What segment it is servicing? What is the USP of the company? So the whole aspect, what we call as the business model canvas of the company, you should be aware of, so that you are able to visualize and see how the company is performing. Go to some of the websites like Screener or Money Control or some of the other websites to kind of pick up some data, performance data, data of last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, so that you understand how the top line of the company is growing, how the bottom line of profitability is increasing, how do you some of the see the ratios, are they making profit at operative level, are they making profit at net profit level, how is the company really doing, and make sure that you got a good sense of the financials of the company, the strategies of the company. Once you've understood the company, now you focus on the role. Where is this role fitting into the overall hierarchy of the organization? How does the career path look like? What will be my day-to-day responsibility? What kind of skills I'll be required to demonstrate when I work on those jobs and roles? Make sure that you understand that and do some research to understand about the culture of the company. That's really, really important, because we know that quite a lot of students, they leave companies just because they could not gel with the managers, they could not gel with the culture of the company, and they kind of tell us that, well, the culture was not good, I was not able to fit myself there. So do this early work, do some research, study about that, and of course, you need to focus on your experience, your summer internship. Make sure that you are preparing your internship summary. If, let's say, the interviewer says, can you talk about your summer internship in 2 minutes, how will you explain that? Remember the contribution, achievement, and learning model. How will you use this model to kind of explain your summer internship? What was the objective of your summer internship? What kind of target did you take up? Where did you work? How did you work? What did you learn? What did you contribute? What did you achieve? Talk about all of that in a most practical manner. Make sure that the interview don't think that you are there only to answer some questions. Please be ready to ask some questions, because companies actually look at students also to say, are they inquisitive enough? Do they ask questions? Have they done some research? And has that research led into some questions which they want to ask? So make sure that you keep a checklist of pointers using the company's information, using the job description. Make a checklist and make sure that you map yourself. Normally I tell students that take the job description, write it down as one column in the Excel sheet. On the other column, you write down your experience related to the job description topic. Believe me, this is very helpful, because when you take every line item on job description and write it down on the right hand side, when you actually start answering, you start answering what you've written, and you start refining it, and that makes your personal interview very, very powerful. Okay, so having spoken about all the gaps, having spoken about all the approaches that you take, what do we really offer from a YUGMA perspective? I know that the placement season is on, and a lot of colleges are coming to us to say, can you offer some short-term program to kind of help our students go through the whole placement process? So I thought I'll just share something that we have shared with quite a few colleges recently. We call it a 2 weeks program for placement preparation, where we typically focus on understanding where students are prepared, how much they are prepared, using a psychometric assessment and a discovery interview. Then we do a small workshops on CV, GD, and PI. We review their CV. We do mock GD and mock PI. We do a communication module and help them practice mock PI. We also have what we call as the SIP articulation and review, where we listen to their SIP, go through their reports, and help them articulate their SIP, both from a CV perspective as well as in the interview perspective. So that's an important element. Of course, there's the aptitude training and practice that I talked about, and giving them some exposure about the industry awareness through business news analysis, and also let's say sectoral analysis program. And at the end, we tell them about the potential roles available or different specializations, and how would you prepare for companies? And therefore, we have a program called Last Mile Training, where for every company that comes in the campus, we do a 2-hour dedicated program to help students prepare for those specific companies. We give them a checklist of the job description based, questions, CV based questions, and functional based questions, to make sure that students are kind of prepared. So broadly that we do, I think we have seen this working. YUGMA has been working in this space for now almost 15 odd years, and we work with more than 100 colleges, and we are here to help. We really suggest all of you students who are here, pass on this message to your fellow students, and they can follow YUGMA.ai, VMentor.ai, because then you will learn a lot of this stuff that I talked about. We keep publishing articles, we keep publishing notes so that we're able to understand what we are offering and how the trend is currently going on, and so on and so forth. So I think I've taken up a lot of time. There may be a few minutes left. Let me see if there are any questions on the LinkedIn. Do we see any questions? Ayush, Ria, do we see any questions?
Yeah. No, sir. No as such question are there. Maybe.
Can we open up on the Zoom? Are there any questions, people who are attending on Zoom? Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And I hope you saw some value in the session. Please ask any questions if you have. I'm very happy to clarify. Even post the session, if you feel that there are questions that you want to address to us, do connect with us on LinkedIn. You can send message to my team members, to myself, and we'll be very happy to connect with you. If you feel interested that we can do some online sessions for your students or send mentors to your campuses to talk to your students, we'll be very happy to do that. Any questions, any comments? Okay, so I think that's it we wanted to share. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your time listening and participating in the call today. I hope you got some value. You saw the insight of the challenges being faced from a sector industry perspective, challenges being highlighted by the recruiters. We wanted to make sure that the corporate view is presented. Then, how do students prepare? And in fact, students who will connect with us will be happy to share checklists with them to help them prepare and make sure that they kind of get checklists for every specialization that we have. And then we talked about how will you work on those gaps, how will you work on developing yourself, and we'll be very happy to work with the colleges in terms of whatever help is required. So thank you very much, everyone. With that, I'm going to close the call, and I really want to thank my team who has been behind this to set up this live session. Thank you, everyone. Ayush, Ria, Nikhil, all the people who have been involved here. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
There's one question from Manas. He's asking what are the other aspects which will be looked into during HR round apart from CV and cultural fit, sir?
Okay, so I think during the HR round, the focus is more on your CV, which is about your own personal self and personality. So when you answer, tell me about yourself. Make sure that you are highlighting some of your skills which the job description is asking for. The whole focus will be what is your past experience. Let's say when you talk about a skill, did you demonstrate that skill during the current institute where you are studying, or did you demonstrate that skill in your previous institution, or did you demonstrate that skill while doing summer internship project? The whole focus on the behavioral aspect. How would you work in a team? How would you lead a small team? If you face a problem, how will you address the problem? Who will you escalate if required? And if you're not being supported by a manager, how will you take it up? So all the practical aspect of working in companies, those are the stuff that's being looked at. They also look at your communication, your personality, the kind of confidence that you are demonstrating during your interview, and the overall awareness about the company, its culture, and so on and so forth. It's all about your CV and yourself. Thank you, Manas, for asking that question. Do we have any more questions?
No, sir, that's it.
Okay, all right then. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and I look forward to connecting with all of you again. Thank you very much.